Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Passive Aggressive Income. We are your hosts, Lexi and Mims. Last week, we started talking about some things to look out for when it comes to deciding whether you want to purchase an investment property or not. And we talked about things like lease agreements and the tenants, and what strategy you're going for, and cosmetics, aesthetics, and just sort of your overall big picture when it comes to deciding whether you want to purchase that property or not. So, this week, we're diving a bit deeper and giving you some action items of things to look for as far as the structure and the actual condition of the house and how that could impact whether you decide to go forward with purchasing or not.
Yeah, perfectly said. So let's just transition into talking about the structural integrity of the property.
Mhm.
This is really important. So if you are out and about, make sure that you take the time to listen in or come back to this part when you are more available. Take notes if you want to as well. So when you're touring a property, make sure you take a look at the ticket items. Check to see how old the furnace and water heaters are. If you see that they are 20 years old, you may be buying new ones in the foreseeable future if you end up purchasing this property. Right? This shouldn't change the decision if of buying or not buying because at the end of the day, you are gonna have to place them at some point of owning the property. Water heaters and furnaces go out all the time. I bought one that was on its last leg, a property with a water heater that was on its last leg. And I didn't have to replace it until we were, I think it was 4 years in of owning the property. So it really all depends on the maintenance of it and are you keeping up with like I said, maintaining it? Is it really beat to hell? It all depends on that specific furnace or that specific water heater. There isn't really like a time on when it's going to take over. So um just pencil it in as one of the expenses anyway,
Yeah.
because at some point it will happen. It's not something that you can avoid while you own a property.
Right. And if something like a water heater or furnace, or that replacement cost is something that could make or break the deal, then it's probably a little bit too close to your
Mm,
highest budget. And maybe you should consider finding a different property that's a little bit more in your price range. So yeah, like Mim said, it's not like deal breaker, but if it feels like it is, then that's probably, just something that you need to consider that like maybe this isn't the property for you.
such a valid point. Yes. Then while you're in the property, you're probably going to go in the basement. If you are avoiding the basement, I urge you to go down there. Go and see the walls and see how the foundation is settling. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that it is leaning in or it's leaning out. Maybe there's a massive crack that is going from the bottom all the way to the top. That means that you're going to have foundation issues, and that is the most expensive, invasive, and pain in the ass thing to deal with when buying a property. I always stay away from properties like this, even if it makes sense, even if it's in a good neighborhood, even if it is beautiful, even if I know I'm going to make a shit ton of money with rent because of the bedrooms in it or whatever the case may be. I'm not going to mess around with foundation issues because it's just not worth it in my opinion. It's just
Hmm.
so much money and it's a long period of time of construction in that house. So maybe the tenants won't be able to access what they need to in the basement, and then that may cause problems with you and the tenants. And it's just really not worth it, in my opinion. But like I said, everything that we say on here is opinion based and experience based.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Mims. When it comes to big foundation issues, this is something that we don't even consider. And I think that's also, some foundation issues may not be as obvious as
Mm.
others. Or I guess in my case, so last episode I talked about touring this duplex that had really difficult tenants. And I
Mhm.
guess we were so distracted by like the chaos of dealing with these tenants and just sort of like overall looking at the property and trying to imagine what we would do with it that when we went into the basement, we didn't realize that on one side of the basement walls, it was like a huge bulge, like a big curve that like in this shape of a C. We totally missed it because it
Oh
was
my
kind of dark
gosh.
down there. And so when we sent our inspector and they're like, hey, like this is a big issue. The ground is like shifting and there's like water that's kind of draining in towards the house and it's causing also all sorts of foundation issues. So if the tenants hadn't scared us off, then definitely these foundation issues would have. And it's just something
Right.
that like I'm not willing to consider because for, tens and tens and tens of thousands of grants that it would have taken to fix the foundation issues, you're really not adding that much value to the house that you're putting in money for because it's kind of something that should be fine anyways. So that's
Mm.
personally why I stay away from foundation issues and talking with other investors. That seems to be a pretty common theme.
And this, if you don't catch it while you're touring and you love the property, I never waive the home inspections.
Never.
I've been urged by people to move along with the process, to waive to make it a contingency, not make it a contingency on the home inspection. I never do because I want to know what the fuck I'm buying.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna really catch things. And they go in there with all of their little tools and stuff like that, flashlights and that little thing that it's a what is that? The line that's like shows how far off the walls are,
Laser.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So just in my opinion, unless you know it's a smoking good deal and you maybe are a home inspector or whatever the case, you're knowledgeable and all that, then sure, whatever.
Mhm.
But I would never waive that. I think that the more knowledge that you have when purchasing something, you're putting all your money, you're parking your money in there. Why would you be careless about what you're buying? You wouldn't do
Yeah.
that with anything else. You go and research every car that you buy. You go
Mhm.
and research every laptop or desktop that you buy. Research what you're parking your money.
Yeah. I am again 100% in agreement with you. I just think that it's so scary to not to be purchasing and like this is buying a house is not a small deal. Like this is a big purchase. And to walk into it and not actually know what you're walking into is really scary for me. And especially as an investor, you really need to take the emotion out of purchasing a property. You can fall in love with the place and it can seem perfect. But if you get caught up in that and you start making rash decisions because, oh, there are other people that are offering on it and you really want to get in first and make your bid as desirable as possible, you could actually be hurting yourself in the end. And, maybe you'll find a duplex that like you're just so in love with and you decide or like you miss out on your offer or whatever. But then there's another duplex that comes along the road and that's a way better fit for you. So just try not to get caught up in the emotion of it. And I would really suggest not ever waiving that inspection.
Right. So while you're in the basement, make sure that you're noticing if it's, wet or if you can smell that musty smell, because that could mean that there is some flooding issues as well, which is not good for it because with the settling and the icing, especially if you're in the Midwest, it's just not a good combination. So make sure that you're paying attention to that as well. Nope.
And look at the grading of the yard. Is it pointing in towards your house? Because that's the path that water's going to take too. So that kind of goes along with like, well, why are we having flooding? Is this an easy fix? Can I build up the soil around the house and put some sand and kind of like regrade water flow away from the house? That could solve the problem, but just looking into that is a good idea.
For sure. We've had to grade a few of our properties as well. Just, from noticing that musty smell. And just for, we know that a property is worth a lot, and we just did a renovation on one of the basements. So we want to just take every precaution on
Mhm.
making sure that nothing gets damaged down there. So do the walkthroughs. I flip on all the switches as well. I can um, and turn on faucets to see if things are working. These aren't things that should, cause you to not purchase the property. Just making sure that, things are turning on when you flip them. Because I flipped on some light switches that didn't work, meaning that there could be some electrical problems,
Mhm.
which does cost money. So just make sure that you are going through everything in that property room by room. So don't feel like you have to rush it, because I know that a lot of people are in and out because they just look at the big picture of it. Make sure that you are taking your time when you are doing that initial walkthrough. So like I said, that isn't a big deal, just something you should be mindful of. Or not a big deal, just something that you should be mindful of. When you drive in, what is the driveway? Is it gravel or is it concrete or blacktop? Personally, I prefer the I don't know. Long term, I see why gravel is something that you want to have. The majorities of my properties have gravel driveways, and I don't love the fact that I have to go in every year and fill in like those holes that happen, especially because we live in the Midwest. It gets cold, it freezes, and, people drive on it a lot. So it creates, just different paths and holes, and so something to keep in mind for that. But filling in the gravel is much easier and cost effective than replacing or filling concrete and blacktop. So there is a trade-off when you are looking at long term. If you're just buying to flip, it doesn't really matter. But long term, gravel is way easier to just pop over there, fill up some buckets of gravel, and dip it into the little holes that have happened throughout the year. And then maybe every 2, 3 years, you go in with a tractor full of gravel and just do another layer of it, rather than pouring in concrete or blacktop.
Mhm. One thing to mention with that, though, is just a consideration if you are living in a cold climate like both Mims and I are, gravel can make snow removal kind of a pain. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, for sure. So if if you have tenants that do it for you, because they live there, make sure that you tell them the car should not be in the driveway while you are snow blowing or whatever, because they will get dinged. So
Yep.
I've learned that. So next, we're going to be looking at the bathroom kitchen areas. So, are the floors spongy? Well, that, my friend, is water damage, and you'll have to replace the flooring and subflooring. So, make sure you check around faucets, bathtubs, and toilets, especially toilets, because a lot of the times you can hear that little leak, and it's been there for a long time, which means there has been some water accumulating at the bottom, and that is just awful. I
Yeah.
hate replacing all of that, but you have to be making sure that you are um, seeing that right off the bat when we're pouring. So if you see mold, especially black mold, I all I can say is run. I don't fuck around with that. I'm just like, I'm not dealing with this. This is not the property for me. I'm gone. And that brings me to the little bugs we are all afraid of. Yes, bed bugs
Oh,
and or roaches. These bugs need at least 3 to 4 treatments to be completely eradicated from the property. So it's not an easy cleaning fix that you can just take to bleach and like, clean in an entire weekend and they're supposed to be gone. That's not how it works. It takes multiple treatments to get them out of there. And it's really hard, especially if there's tenants living in there, because their habits may be bringing them back. So make sure that you are noticing if you see the little creepy crawlers. Also, termite damage is something to look out for. They can eat away at your foundation, which causes structural problems, like we mentioned before with foundation problems. So you may not see it in the walls of the basements. Maybe it's underneath,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's underneath the entire property and you don't find out until the home inspection. So never waive it.
Yes, never waive it because the inspector is trained to look into those things that like you might not be able to see with your quick walkthrough. You're not going to be able to spend hours and hours there yourself. A lot of times people have, when they're selling their property, they have showings lined up one after the other. And so that's just, I think, another good reason to stick with your inspector.
Yes. So next is there galvanized plumbing? It corrodes and could leak out, which means it's in your water. If it's in the home, it has been there for a long time. So this is $1,000 fix. So I would stay away from a property that has galvanized plumbing and also knob and tube electrical work. It's a really old install, plus it's a dangerous type of install because it causes a lot of fires. If parts need to be replaced in the electrical boxes, stores generally don't carry them, so it's a hard fix. So be careful with this. And I actually have a direct quote from Progressive Insurance about knob and tube wiring. So it says, homeowner insurance that covers knob and tube wiring can be tricky. Some providers may offer you a policy, while many will decline to offer a policy. Companies willing to insure a home with knob and tube wiring may charge a higher premium because of the increased risk of fire it presents, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, my husband, who is a licensed electrician, stated that he would refuse work on a property with this type of wiring, meaning that many electricians would be not willing to work on a property like this. So, you're going to have limited parts to replace, you're going to have limited insurance to cover, or it's going to be really expensive to cover.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have limited people that want to work on this type of property as well. Plus, the fire hazard is a no-go for me.
Yeah. And so one thing to look out for with knob and tube wiring is two-prong outlets. Those are really old. And so that's a really good indicator as you just a person walking through when you're going through room by room and you're flipping on and off your light switches, just look at the outlets and make sure that they're three-prong and not two-prong.
Yes, absolutely. So, lastly, how is the roof doing? Can you tell that it's tired and needs repair? Well, then you better prepare yourself for a 15 plus K expense because a roof is not something you can ignore. Not unless you are a slumlord, and we are not in that type of business, so that doesn't apply to us. We take care of our properties, so uh, make sure that you are taking a look at the roof, take a step back onto the street and look at how it's doing from that angle. If maybe you brought a ladder, maybe get yourself up there if you're safe. Not if you are not, don't go up there. So Um, but yeah, just make sure that you are looking at that because it's a biggest expense. It's something that has to be done. Otherwise, there is going to be a lot of problems due to that. And it's the top of the house. Obviously, you need to take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I also want to mention a few red flags that I've personally run into that have made me run from properties or at least reconsider if I want to purchase it or not. So the first one is large retaining walls. Big, huge retaining walls are expensive. And
Mm.
to get like a proper structure is very expensive if it's in bad shape. So things to look out for are like step-like cracks or any like weird angles or any bulging or caving in. It will likely have to be repaired and it's extremely expensive and you'll have to go and get like a structural engineer to make sure that it's done properly. And retaining walls can last for, years and years and years, and then you don't have to worry about it. But if you are buying a property with a big retaining wall that's at the end of its life, just know that that's going to be a really big ticket item.
Mm.
And then another thing that I would look out for is being the lowest property surrounded by houses that are on hills above you. So this isn't a total deal breaker, but you are at risk of flooding from runoff and pooling water from those other houses. So if you do
Mm,
have something like a big retaining wall, just maybe go and look at the property after a big rainstorm if that's possible and just kind of see what's happening. And if you are looking at this type of property when you're going inside, look for water damage like on the ceilings or in the basement or, along the bottoms of the walls and just kind of know what you're getting yourself into.
plus the lakefront properties as well, because then you are right there with water, being so close to the property, and being in a lakefront property, uh, insurance is more expensive as well. So
Mhm.
make sure that you are well aware of that.
Yes, that's a good point. And then another big ticket item that I'm currently dealing with is siding. So my current property is in desperate need of new siding. I'm in a 100-year-old duplex, and I knew when I bought the house that the siding would need to be completely like taken off and rewrap the house and put on. And we have like rotted wood right now, and it's just really ugly. The colors aren't great. And I knew that this was something that I was going to deal with. But now that I've had this property for about 2 years, it's still something that I haven't been able to pull the trigger on because it's so expensive. And just it's just like a really big cost. And so I would recommend sending out a contractor if you need something like new siding or a new roof or like a big ticket item. So send a contractor out to get estimates on how much those things would cost ahead of time before you decide to purchase the property, and that way you can evaluate whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah, I think those are all really great, and I know what siding costs as well, and that's just not a fun thing to look into, so I definitely get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did we learn today? If the property makes sense as far as the numbers go, fuck the cosmetic ugliness. Not a big deal. You can go in there with a uh, coat of paint and make it pretty. You can replace the flooring. You can get new backsplash. You can clean it up. You can take out the weird wooden whatever that is in there that is super old if you want to. You can make it however you want, to make it look more presentable. That shouldn't affect whether you want to purchase it or not. Also, location is key. Do not buy a property where your tenants will be afraid to walk to their cars. It needs to feel safe, and it's, out in the boonies, like we talked about in the previous episode, it will be harder to rent out. So just making sure that you are checking out the property in the nighttime and in the day, because those are two different vibes. So make sure that
Mm-hmm.
you are doing a little drive-by in both times of the day, and just look at the neighborhood. Look at is there a homeless shelter that's right across the street that may be a little bit harder for, women to go and live in, across the street because of the higher risk. So maybe that's going to limit you on who rents from you. Or is it in a really beautiful neighborhood that's family oriented and is in a good district? That's going to work in your favor as well. Check to see if the current tenants are in a year or a month-to-month contract, especially if you're going to own or occupy. I know a deal fell through for us because both sides were in a year contract and we needed to be in there 60 days from closing. So that did not work. We got our hopes up high because we did not check right away, and then we lost that deal. So make sure right off the bat, you're touring the property, you ask right away. It's not like that's private information. They should be able to tell you that right off the bat if they're locked in or not.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Big ticket items like the roof, foundation issues, mold, water damage, knob and tube wiring, galvanized plumbing, creepy crawlies, furnace and water heaters are something you should pay attention to no matter what. Everything else is going to be costly, but may or may not make the deal go through or not. So just keep the big ticket items at the forefront of your mind whenever you're walking through property.
Yeah, and hopefully this podcast is helpful for you guys to know the kind of things to look for when you are touring a property, or whether to even go into the property or not, to look at it and, talk with the realtor. And, you can end up spending a lot of money on inspectors for, if you're thinking about offering on like 10 different properties and you don't really know what you're looking for, so you're just paying someone to go and look at it. Hopefully this list of items is helpful for you, so you can walk into a property and kind of know what things you want to avoid and have that evaluation done beforehand, so you don't get caught up in the emotions of it and then you aren't spending like $1,000 just on inspectors when you really could have like seen those red flags initially.
Exactly. Well, we hope that you learned from these past two episodes of things to look for when you are purchasing an investment property, when you are at that first awesome state of it, of looking around and seeing which one is a good fit for you. And we hope that you took notes or come back and save this episode to your favorites. And make sure that you follow this podcast on Spotify so that you are alerted whenever we release a new episode, so that you are up to date with all the things that we have to share as far as passive income.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye. Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexi. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive. If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.